Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us on the webinar today. We are joined today by Elaine Orler, the founder at Talent Function and chair of the Talent Board. We also have Christine Nicholas here, the CEO of People Science, a recruitment process outsourcing company. We're going to talk a little bit about a review of the 2011 Candy Awards and how to apply for the 2012 awards, the recognition in the process, and all of the other pieces that your company will benefit from as being part of the Candy Awards. Thank you again for joining us. Without further ado, Christine Nicholas here to begin talking a little bit about the process.
Thank you, and good afternoon. This is Christine. I'm joined by Elaine Orler. Elaine, did you want to say hello?
Hello, everyone.
Great. So we know that even though we're working across the country, we both have a voice. I am the founder of People Science, and we're very, very proud to be sponsors of the Candy Awards this year, their second annual year. I'm very shortly going to turn this over to Elaine, who's going to explain a lot of the data that was collected last year and how to look at the 2012. But we wanted to take a moment up front to talk about the value of the candidate experience, because we know in our world here at People Science, we often have some inquiries from human resource that understand, yes, the candidate experience is important, and the first reason is because it's the right thing to do. When we apply that to a business technology, we often hear from our partners that they'd like the business to understand the value. So we spent quite some time, as Elaine's team has, saying, what is the value of the candidate experience? How does that affect organizations beyond the fact that this is the right thing to do, increase the experience of the candidates that are applying to our organizations? So if we take a look first at B2B companies, companies that do business to business, it's a little less obvious, the effect of the candidate experience on your business as a whole when you say we do business not so much with a customer or consumer, but with another business. Well, as we look at the evolution of candidates, your reputation these days precedes you. Things such as Glassdoor, all different types of Google searches that are conducted, and the research that's done. We have good documentation, some of that Elaine is going to talk about, of how candidates are now approaching organizations, very different than it was even 5 years ago. A lot of our data shows that businesses are looking at your business to see what you're doing, but at the same time, your candidate is looking at who you're doing business with and how that influences them as well. And then your candidate is actually becoming your customer. So in the second tier, if I'm a chemist and I'm looking for a position and I apply to your company and you don't respond to me, my identification with your company is company doesn't respond. I'm powerless in that situation. The company doesn't welcome me. That's the emotional side effect of this. And then when they become your customer, they carry that thought into that position. So when we say business to business, quite often your reputation is preceding you and your business now becomes your customer. And then today's growing talent shortage has choices. Even though there's a surplus in candidates in many spaces, there's a larger shortage of candidates in other talent sets. When we say, old terminology such as war on talent, those talent shortages are still very much out there, meaning we have a shorter pool to pull from. And these days it's even more important to make sure that they have a good experience. So that kind of gives you an identifier for B2B. With business to consumer companies, the cost of a customer, I know our company's done a lot of work with cost of vacancy and cost per customer and how much is the true cost to an organization if you don't have an individual in a position, and then if you lose a customer, how that effect ties into that. So we've spent a lot of time living in this world right now, and we can tell you firsthand that the cost of a customer is greatly affected when they apply for a position with you and they don't, A, get the job, B, feel bad about the experience in the job, and then worst of all, C, get no response at all. Again, Elaine's going to talk about those soon. And then what we've run into is a term that we see quite often used in retail about remorse buying. So if I'm a customer of yours and I'm applying for a position and I don't hear from you, yet I still like your product, so I come back to your store, I may retain a customer, may be retained as a customer, but it's with remorse. And remorse buyers tend to deflate the company they're buying for more than any of the others because they continue to shop, they continue to look for bad experiences to encourage them to stop shopping there, and they spread that word. People tend to talk about negatives a lot more than the positives. Referrals. When you're a customer and you've applied for, or you're a customer and now you become a candidate, you apply for a position, that position you're not treated well or you don't receive it, you're not going to be as apt to refer someone. On the flip side, we've seen definitive improvement in referrals from customers that feel as though they've come out of a candidate experience feeling positive about the customer. And then the customer candidate advocacy. So this customer that feels good about the candidate experience, even if they aren't brought into the organization, can easily become an advocate. And with today's transparent world, that's what we're all looking for. And then two other notes. The first is the power is shifting. It's something that we feel passionate about here at People Science as we've been working with many, many different fields of talent sets. The shift of I am the employer, therefore you need to follow my rules, and if we don't get back to you or we don't respond to you as a candidate, you'll come back to us because the power resides with us, has really changed. The newer generations coming to the workforce, and even the generations who've been in the workforce for 30 and 40 years no longer feel good about that experience and believe they have choices. So as candidates are looking at a broad spectrum of choices because of the transparency that's out there and their ability to look at different types of organizations to work for, they become more selective. And if they feel as though they're more empowered, as they are, that changes the way they view that relationship. So treating them, again, candidate experience increasing, power shift changes. And can your candidate be a target market? So I mean, I think that's probably the key essence of this. What is the cost of losing a candidate? What is the cost of a bad candidate experience or turning a customer or a potential customer one day, turning them into an advocate as compared to somebody who feels bad about their experience? So with that, I will turn the show over to Elaine. And also note that you're welcome to ask questions anywhere along the way. You should have a question box that you can simply send a question into.
Well, thank you. And I really appreciate you guys as a sponsor this year. So we're very excited about that. I think everything that you talked about on this slide before really premises some of the reasons why we set out to establish an award process to help recognize companies that are really striving to do something about that experience in a positive way. And for us in the award process, positive became a very, very, very tricky term and conversational piece because there's so much attention in the market now around the negative experience, around how bad things are, the proverbial and forever black hole, that we wanted to look at some ways that we could really help elevate companies that were actually trying to do something better. So in 2011, the organization called the Talent Board was formed, and it's an organization, it's a nonprofit. It was founded by 4 board members, Jerry Crispin, myself, Ed Newman, and Mark McMillan. And the intention of the board was to really establish an award process for the candidate experience. So we set out with very little direction and a whole lot of vision in 2011 to launch our first award process. I can say that we had a variety of ideas on what we wanted to present and what we wanted to do, but we had no idea how or if the market would embrace our direction. And so we started with surveying over 100 companies that really, in general, would say, would you be willing to participate in this type of effort if it were to be something public? And almost all of them unanimously came back and said yes, they would welcome an opportunity to participate. And then the rubber hit the road. We had about 50 plus companies that actually chose to complete the surveys in the initial process. The other 50 or so that said yes, we'd be interested, all had some very great concerns when they reviewed the questions and realized we don't do any of these things, or we do so few of these, or our experience is so bad we wouldn't want it to be recognized, or we wouldn't want anybody to know about it. We assured them that the benchmark report and their company name and brand would never be published if they didn't proceed. But a lot of time and attention is necessary in completing the survey. We had a little over 30 companies that proceeded to round 2, and round 2 was one of the most valuable things I think we've been able to provide to the market thus far. Round 2 of the survey process requires a company actually initiate with their candidates and ask them to respond to a candidate survey, which is very mirrored to the employer survey. So what we ask the employers of questions, we're asking candidates the mirrored image of similar types of questions. And I'll show you a couple of the way those reports came out. But prior to expecting the candidate survey results, we had no idea how many we would get. We had a little over 11,000 candidates respond to the overall survey in less than 35 days. And that created for us a wealth of information about the experience. From there, we had 24 companies that were elevated on the slide before about those that were winners, and 5 companies that came out with distinction. And with the distinction is really where they were doing something remarkable or something even above and beyond our base expectations to really profile some of the things that they're doing for candidate experience. All of these details you're going to find at the end of this presentation, the website, to go to the candies.org or the candidateexperienceawards.org. We have a 2011 report that's about 50 pages. It's free, it's downloadable. You can read all of the results and details around the different aspects of the survey from last year. As we go into the next slide, I wanted to show you 2 of the key points that have happened from the survey process. As an example of some of the questions that we asked, one of the critical questions was, how do you communicate with your candidates? Really looking for corporations to tell us specifically, what are you doing to create a conversation, to create awareness, to create access with the candidates? And we divided this in 2 categories, those that are predominantly online and somewhat social, which is the first half of the slide, and those that can tend to be more traditional and in many cases direct or true face-to-face relationship based. And what we found when we asked the employers was that over 50% clearly were starting on the LinkedIn, and we saw Twitter and talent communities and Facebook in a growth mode. Again, we didn't have these types of tools 5 and 7 years ago, so to see them already leveraged at 30 to 40% was really interesting to us. But what we also found validating in this question is that corporations have really turned to making that career site the front door for all candidates. In every case, the corporations had a career site or web page, and we're definitely fostering an employee referral program. We're continuing to work direct calls and conversations with candidates, and you can see how these things kind of shift down from here. So to see what was an extensive and to see where it was routine added quite a bit of value to some of our understandings of what companies are doing today. The other component to this slide was we really actually captured the area where there's experimentation. And you can see very quickly from this chart that experimentation is definitely happening on the social side. So many of these organizations, we expect a large repeat custom company submission this year. And we expect to see that where it was experimentation to see some of those numbers move into routine. But one of the things, like I said, is a mirrored image of this. If we go to the next slide, we asked candidates the same questions. And where were they spending their time and what were they doing related to the business? We found some interesting things here, some very, very interesting things. Specifically, when you look at the career site, it was absolutely where the candidates understood and knew they needed to be. They were aware and they used it to interact. So the candidate question was, 1, were you aware that the company does this? And if you were aware of it, did you use this information or this mechanism in any way with your application process? So you can see from this slide that it's actually slightly different than the last slide. Candidates definitely use the career site. They understand that's where they need to apply. Most of them were aware of and used the direct call, email, and the employee referral program. As you move down the slide, you can see where there's some other things where they just weren't aware that the company even had many of these things. What became fascinating for us in the statistics was the actual social side of this slide, where aware and used LinkedIn was the highest, which makes actual sense for us in the industry. But as you move down where we spend our time and attention between Twitter and Facebook and some of these other things, the candidates' awareness was strong, but their use of that tool and that mechanism related to the job was low. So we are expecting to see some changes in this as well going forward. But from a validation perspective, where do we spend the money that we need to as a business to attract talent? And where do we see, again, awareness is the first step. The second step is interaction. And that was one of the key things the candidates said over and over again that they wished they had more of. more interaction, more communication, more understanding. So go to the next slide. Really just focusing again on where that candidate was hearing information. From the 2011 data, we asked all the candidates. We had 7,500 candidates respond to the rejection question. How are you notified? Over and of those percentages, majority of them said they were never notified. But none of the above. Very disheartening for us as a whole. But the reality is this is what's happening in the market today. And then the second highest category are those that receive the do not reply email. Thanks so much for submitting something to us. Please do not reply to us. Do not send do not reply to this email message because it won't go anywhere. Where we saw the most positive candidate comments when it came to these categories were when they said they received a phone call, or they were able to check their status online, or they received a personal email that communicated to them directly what was happening with them in the process. So again, a big shift in the market. Majority of the time, we're still not sending candidates information, but the companies that were sending information, that were providing the value, the commentary from their candidates you could clearly see was much stronger and much more positive. We go to the next slide. I'm going to focus just a little bit on a word cloud that we actually created from a little over 17,000 candidate comments, because they had an opportunity to comment on multiple questions. So this wasn't just one candidate, one comment. Each candidate probably had anywhere from 5 to 7 comments out of the 11,000 candidates that responded. And through just putting in all the comments in a process, this is really what came out as a graphical representation of what the candidates were saying. And we use this as a concept to say, what are your candidates saying about your process? Do you know, as a business, what's happening with your candidates? Do you know how they feel about the overall business? Can you articulate clearly what that experience is, where you are today, and where you need it to go? And one of the things we really want to focus on for the 2012 awards is ensuring that organizations understand that the award process is absolutely free. The value that you get from just submitting in round one is you do get a full benchmark report back of how your company is doing compared to the rest of the overall scores. There's anonymity. You will remain anonymous as a participant unless you proceed to round 2 or unless you are a winner. So from those two categories, even if you proceed to round 2 and you are not a winner, your company name is not going to be broadcasted as somebody that didn't make it. Only those companies that met the baseline and proceeded through round 1 and 2 will be considered recognized in the market. So again, our goal is to shine a spotlight on what is working and let the organizations gain the data and the information they need to continue to improve these overall processes. So as we go to the next slide, really want to caveat that we've taken this to heart as one of the important missions of the overall candidate experience. If you think about your organization, you have the ability to create this kind of a value proposition for your company as well. Many organizations, you have over 1 million applicants a year. If you only hire 10,000 of them, you have 990,000 people you're saying are not eligible to work for you. And how you say you're good enough to be a customer but not good enough to work here has implications. So we started from the beginning of the conversation, real serious business implications. It could be critical talent that just doesn't like to work with you because you didn't respect them. Those scientists that are only 5 of them in the universe that do what needs to be done have an experience that they're going to want to talk about, positive or negative. Down to the flip side of those that are a large volume of talent that you need to do repetitive type work that had such a negative experience they can't get employment there, that tell all their friends. There's such a variety of ways that we need to focus on this experience and just focusing on keeping it neutral. I use the concept that actual neutral equals positive today. If we do nothing to make it bad, we've made it good. So really thinking about, again, the overall experience. This is not about creating a state of nirvana for everybody, because it's not. I don't think that's actually possible. But it is about treating people with respect and dignity and thinking about how you would want to be treated yourself if you were the candidate in the process. So with that, if we can go to the next slide. We have several outlines that came from the overall report, and I do encourage you to download the report. It is free. www.thecandies.org is one of the websites. You can take a look at the whole 2011 report. We also make available the actual questions for the 2012 report. We've had some similar questions we're carrying through from 2011, and we've added several new ones to make it easier to understand and to benchmark for each of the companies. But the important piece here is that you can't just assume that the candidate experience will solve its own problem. You're going to constantly need to think about how your company is represented going forward. So with that, if we go to the last slide, and really just want to talk a little bit about, again, the award process. The importance is that the website, again, is thecandidateexperienceawards.org or www.thecandies.org is our second site. You can access the report from here. You can start your submission process for the awards. There's a lot of opportunities to look at some of the other data and the history, as well as review our sponsors. Again, thank you to our sponsor today. You can go to the last slide for me. I really want to again focus on the fact that we have a very narrow window left for the 2012 awards. Our survey, a formal survey, closes this Friday the 13th, and that's not a bad omen to us. But the reality is we need to open up the round 2 for our customers that have applied thus far, and we have several companies that are probably going to find out they're eligible for round 2 this Friday. So with that, we encourage you to think about applying to the awards. The process time it takes to complete round 1 can be anywhere from 20 minutes to an hour, depending on the time that you need. We do provide you a link back to your survey, so you don't have to do it all in one sitting. Just come and pre-register by completing the first 2 pages of information. You'll get an email link with your survey to complete. And if you do initiate your survey process this week before Friday, so anytime up until the end of the evening on Thursday, we will keep your survey open and eligible to be completed until the end of the day, Monday next week, so the 16th. So we're allowing a little extra time over the weekend for those that are just getting into the process this week, and we hope that that will be of a benefit. Again, you've received the free benchmark report. Round 2, we're able to survey your candidates, and then you would be recognized as a winner if you complete round 1 and round 2 and meet the threshold requirements. We're announcing all the winners in a huge gala event planned for the HR Technology Conference in October in Chicago. And we have several major news publications that have intentions of picking up some more of the information around the winners. So we're excited to see how 2012 proceeds.
Thank you, Elaine. We'd like to thank everyone for attending. I think I don't see any pronounced questions at this point, so I'm thinking that, and I feel as though you've done a great job answering questions. Again, I think the beauty of this is the data is the only data that I have ever seen that addresses the candidate experience valuable to any company. And the fact that this is a nonprofit organization and that these reports are completely free and completely confidential as an attendee is kind of a no-brainer. So we hope that we've answered any questions you have. We hope you'll apply. If you have any questions, again, here's the website, thecandies.org. And again, if you're connected with People Science, you're welcome to give us a call here at 888-924-1004, and we can steer you towards the talent board. Thank you very much, and have a good day.